The bullet tore through the saloon window at the exact moment Adelaide Zimmerman raised her cup of tea to her lips. And though the lead missed her by inches, she knew in that instant her life in Montrose, Colorado, would never be the same. It was the spring of 1882, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty Main Street, where horses stamped impatiently at hitching posts, and miners fresh from the mountains spent their wages on whiskey and card games. Adelaide had arrived in town 3 months prior, a young woman of 22 with auburn hair that caught fire in the sunlight and green eyes that held both determination and sorrow. She had come west after her father's death back in Philadelphia, seeking a fresh start in a place where no one knew her past or the scandal that had driven her family into poverty. She worked as a seamstress in Mrs. Patterson's dress shop, her delicate fingers creating beautiful garments for the wives and daughters of ranchers and businessmen who were slowly bringing civilization to this rugged corner of Colorado. The shop sat above the general store, and Adelaide rented a small room in the boarding house run by a kindly widow named Mrs. Howell. Her life had settled into a comfortable routine, and she had even begun to feel something like happiness again. The bullet had come from nowhere, shattering not just glass, but the illusion of safety she had carefully constructed. Men rushed outside, shouting and drawing their weapons, but the shooter had vanished into the maze of buildings and alleyways that made up the growing town. Adelaide set down her teacup with trembling hands, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Patterson hurried over, her round face pale with concern. "Yes, I think so." Adelaide pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm her racing pulse. "Just startled." But as the day wore on and she returned to her work, Adelaide could not shake the feeling that the bullet had been meant for someone specific. Perhaps not her, but someone in that saloon. The thought troubled her through the evening as she walked back to the boarding house, her shawl pulled tight against the cool mountain air. Harrison Rhodes first saw Adelaide Zimmerman on a Tuesday evening when he rode into Montrose with his cattle drive. He had spent 3 weeks moving 100 head of cattle from his ranch in the Uncompahgre Valley to the stockyards, and his body ached with the kind of bone-deep weariness that only a hot bath and a soft bed could cure. At 26, Harrison had already lived more life than many men twice his age. He had inherited his father's ranch 5 years earlier after both his parents succumbed to fever, and he had built it into one of the most successful operations in western Colorado through sheer determination and backbreaking work. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, the color of storm clouds over the mountains, and his face bore the weathered look of a man who spent his days under an unforgiving sky. He dressed simply in worn denim and a leather vest, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face from the eternal Colorado sun. Harrison had come into town not just for the cattle sale, but also to escape the increasingly uncomfortable situation at his ranch. For the past 6 months, Vivian Carlisle had been making her intentions abundantly clear. She was the daughter of his nearest neighbor, a beautiful blonde woman of 24 with ice-blue eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. Her father owned the second-largest ranch in the valley, and it was clear that both she and her father saw a union between the two families as the logical next step. But Harrison had no interest in Vivian Carlisle. He found her calculating and cold, more interested in his land and status than in him as a person. She would appear at his ranch uninvited, bringing baskets of food and batting her eyelashes, touching his arm with proprietary familiarity that made his skin crawl. He had tried to discourage her gently, but Vivian was not a woman who accepted rejection easily. He spotted Adelaide quite by accident. He had just finished his business at the stockyards and was heading to the hotel when he saw her walking down the wooden sidewalk, her green dress swaying with each step, her hair gleaming in the golden evening light. She moved with quiet grace, her head held high despite the rough surroundings. Something about her caught his attention and held it, drawing him like a moth to flame. Harrison found himself changing direction, following at a discreet distance, telling himself he just wanted to see where she was going. She turned into the boarding house, and he stood on the street for a long moment, wondering what had come over him. He did not believe in love at first sight, thought such notions were the province of dime novels and romantic fools. Yet something about this woman had stirred something in his chest, something he had not felt in a very long time. The next morning, Harrison made inquiries and learned that the beautiful woman in the green dress was Adelaide Zimmerman, a seamstress from back east who kept to herself and worked hard. She was unmarried, respectable, and well-liked by those who knew her. The information pleased him more than it should have. He contrived a reason to visit Mrs. Patterson's dress shop that afternoon, claiming he needed a new shirt made. It was a thin excuse, as most men simply bought ready-made garments, but Mrs. Patterson seemed delighted by the business and ushered him inside. Adelaide was seated by the window, her needle flashing in the sunlight as she worked on a delicate piece of embroidery. She looked up when he entered, and their eyes met for the first time. Harrison felt the impact of that gaze like a physical blow, and from the way her eyes widened slightly, he thought perhaps she felt it too. "Mr. Rhodes, is it?" Mrs. Patterson beamed. "Miss Zimmerman, would you take Mr. Rhodes's measurements, please? He needs a new shirt." Adelaide rose gracefully, setting aside her work. "Of course." Her voice was soft and cultured, with the refined accent of the East still coloring her words. She approached with her measuring tape, and Harrison found himself acutely aware of her nearness, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "I am Adelaide Zimmerman," she said quietly, her eyes focused on her task as she measured his shoulders. "Harrison Rhodes. I have a ranch in the Uncompahgre Valley." His voice came out rougher than he intended, affected by her proximity. "That must be beautiful country." She moved around him, professional and efficient, but he could see the slight tremor in her hands, the way her breath quickened almost imperceptibly. "It is. Perhaps you would like to see it sometime." The words came out before he could stop them, bold and forward in a way that was unlike him. Adelaide paused, her eyes meeting his again. For a moment, something passed between them, a connection that defied explanation. Then she stepped back, her cheeks flushed. "Perhaps. That is very kind of you to offer." Over the next 2 weeks, Harrison found excuses to remain in Montrose. He told himself he needed to finalize business deals, check on investments, meet with other ranchers. The truth was he could not bring himself to leave, not when Adelaide Zimmerman was there. He began to court her properly, calling on her at the boarding house under Mrs. Howell's watchful eye, taking her for walks along the river, sitting with her on the porch in the evening as the stars emerged overhead. Adelaide found herself falling for Harrison Rhodes with a speed and intensity that frightened her. She had been courted before, back in Philadelphia, but those men had been pale shadows compared to this rugged Westerner with his quiet strength and genuine kindness. Harrison listened when she spoke, asked her opinions, treated her as an equal rather than a pretty ornament. He told her about his ranch, his dreams of building something lasting, his love for this wild and beautiful land. She told him about her life back east, though she glossed over the painful parts, the scandal and shame that had driven her west. Harrison did not press for details, seeming to understand that everyone who came to Colorado was running from something. They were sitting by the river on a warm afternoon, the water rushing over smooth stones, when Harrison took her hand for the first time. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but firm. "Adelaide, I know we have not known each other long, but I feel like I have been waiting for you my whole life." His voice was low and earnest, his eyes searching hers. "I would like to court you properly, with the intention of marriage if you will have me." Adelaide's heart swelled with an emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "Harrison, I would like that very much." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered face, and Adelaide thought she had never seen anything more beautiful than this strong, honest man looking at her with such open affection. But their happiness was being watched by jealous eyes. Vivian Carlyle had come to Montrose the previous week, ostensibly to visit a friend, but in reality to check on Harrison. She had been furious to discover him still in town, and even more furious to learn the reason why. Adelaide Zimmerman. The name tasted like poison on Vivian's tongue. She watched from the shadows as Harrison courted the seamstress, saw the way he looked at her with an expression he had never once turned on Vivian herself. Rage and jealousy consumed her, eating away at her carefully constructed composure. Harrison Rhodes was hers. She had decided that long ago, and Vivian Carlyle always got what she wanted. She began to make inquiries about Adelaide, digging into the woman's past with ruthless efficiency. What she discovered delighted her. Adelaide's father had been involved in a financial scandal back in Philadelphia, accused of embezzling from his employer. Though nothing had been proven, the family had been ruined by the accusations. Adelaide had fled west to escape the stigma. Vivian could use this information, she knew. She could spread rumors, destroy Adelaide's reputation in Montrose just as it had been destroyed in Philadelphia. But as she watched Harrison and Adelaide together, she realized that Harrison might not care about scandal. He might stand by Adelaide regardless. No, Vivian needed a more permanent solution. The idea came to her slowly, growing in her mind like a dark flower. If Adelaide were to become ill, seriously ill, Harrison would be forced to return to his ranch. The courtship would end. Adelaide might even die, and then Harrison would need comfort, would turn to the woman who had always been there for him. Vivian knew about poisons. Her mother had been skilled in herbalism, teaching Vivian which plants healed and which killed. In the right dose, certain substances could mimic natural illness, could slowly drain the life from a person while leaving no obvious cause. She began to plan carefully. She learned Adelaide's routines, discovered that the seamstress took her meals at the boarding house with the other residents. She befriended Mrs. Howell with lies and charm, presenting herself as a concerned friend of Harrison's who wanted to meet the woman who had captured his heart. Mrs. Howell, a trusting soul, invited Vivian to dinner one evening. Adelaide was polite but reserved, clearly uncomfortable with Vivian's overly friendly manner. Harrison had mentioned Vivian to her, had explained the unwanted attention, and Adelaide could see the calculation behind those cold blue eyes. After that dinner, Vivian began to visit the boarding house regularly, always bringing small gifts of food, jams and preserves and baked goods. Mrs. Howell was delighted by the generosity, never suspecting that Vivian was carefully studying the household, learning where food was prepared and how it was served. Adelaide began to feel unwell on a warm evening in early June. At first, it was just a slight nausea, a weakness that she attributed to the heat and long hours of work. But over the next few days, the symptoms worsened. She developed terrible stomach cramps, violent episodes of vomiting that left her weak and shaking. Her skin grew pale, her eyes dull. Mrs. Howell sent for the town doctor, a gruff but competent man named Dr. Fletcher. He examined Adelaide thoroughly, asked questions about her symptoms, and concluded it was likely food poisoning or perhaps influenza. He prescribed rest and bland foods, warned that it might take time for her to recover. But Adelaide did not improve. She grew steadily worse, her body wasting away as she could keep nothing down. She developed a fever that came and went, leaving her shaking with chills one moment and burning up the next. The pain in her stomach was constant, a gnawing agony that no medicine seemed to touch. Harrison was frantic with worry. He moved into the hotel so he could be near her, visiting the boarding house every day despite Mrs. Howell's concerns about propriety. He sat by Adelaide's bedside, holding her hand, watching helplessly as she suffered. "I do not understand," he said to Dr. Fletcher. "Why is she not getting better?" The doctor shook his head, clearly troubled. "I have seen cases like this before, but rarely. Sometimes people just take ill, Mr. Rhodes. We do not always know why." But Harrison's instincts told him something was wrong, that this was not natural illness. He began to pay closer attention, noting when Adelaide's symptoms worsened, trying to find a pattern. It was Vivian's mistake that gave her away. She had been so careful, adding small amounts of poison to the food sent up to Adelaide's room, disguising her actions with concern and kindness. But greed made her careless. She wanted Adelaide gone quickly, and she began to increase the doses. Harrison came to visit one afternoon and found Vivian leaving Adelaide's room, carrying a tray with an empty bowl. "I brought her some soup," Vivian said, smiling sweetly. The poor dear could barely manage a few spoonfuls. Something in her tone, in the satisfaction that flickered briefly in her eyes, triggered alarm bells in Harrison's mind. He watched Vivian descend the stairs, then entered Adelaide's room. Adelaide was worse than he had ever seen her, her face gray, her breathing shallow. She was barely conscious, moaning softly with pain. Terror gripped Harrison's heart. "Adelaide, sweetheart, can you hear me?" He took her hand, shocked by how cold and clammy her skin felt. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with fever. "Harrison, it hurts so much." I know. "Hold on, darling. Please hold on." He kissed her hand, his mind racing. He left her room and went downstairs, finding Mrs. Howell in the kitchen. "Has Miss Carlyle been bringing food to Adelaide often?" "Oh yes, she has been so kind. She brings something almost every day, always insisting Adelaide needs proper nutrition." Mrs. Howell beamed, oblivious to Harrison's growing suspicion. "I need you to stop letting her bring food. Do not allow her in the house anymore." Mrs. Howell blinked in surprise. "But Mr. Rhodes, she has been such a help." "Please, Mrs. Howell, I cannot explain right now, but I believe Adelaide's illness may not be natural. Trust me on this." The widow's expression shifted to alarm. "You think someone is poisoning her? I pray I am wrong, but I cannot take chances. No more food from Miss Carlyle, and I want to know everything Adelaide eats from now on." Harrison went back upstairs and settled into the chair by Adelaide's bed, determined not to leave her side. He sent word to Dr. Fletcher, asking him to come immediately and to bring any medical texts he had on poisoning. The doctor arrived within the hour, his expression grave as Harrison explained his suspicions. Together they examined Adelaide more carefully, noting symptoms that could indeed indicate poisoning rather than natural illness. The timing of her worst episodes, the specific nature of her pain, the way certain symptoms appeared and disappeared. "If you are right, and someone has been poisoning her, the best thing we can do now is stop any further poison from entering her system and help her body purge what is already there," Dr. Fletcher said. "It will not be pleasant, but she is young and strong. If we caught it in time, she may survive." may survive. The words hit Harrison like a fist to the gut. He had found the woman he wanted to spend his life with, and someone was trying to take her away from him. Over the next few days, Harrison barely left Adelaide's side. He slept in the chair, taking his meals in her room, tending to her with a gentleness that surprised even himself. He bathed her fevered skin with cool cloths, held her when the pain made her cry out, whispered words of comfort and encouragement when she begged for it to stop. "You are going to be all right," he told her again and again. "You are so strong, Adelaide. Fight this. Come back to me." Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Adelaide began to improve. With no new poison entering her system, her body began to heal itself. The violent vomiting episodes decreased in frequency. Her fever broke. Color began to return to her cheeks. On the 5th day, she woke with clear eyes for the first time in weeks. "Harrison." Her voice was weak but lucid. He leaned forward, taking her hand in both of his. "I am here, sweetheart. I am right here." "What happened?" "I feel like I have been trampled by a horse." "You were poisoned, Adelaide. Someone has been putting poison in your food." Her eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "Poisoned? But who would want to hurt me?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "I believe it was Vivian Carlyle." He explained his suspicions, how he had noticed the pattern, how Adelaide had begun to improve once Vivian's food was no longer allowed. Adelaide listened in growing horror, struggling to comprehend that someone would want her dead. "But why? I have never done anything to her." "Because she wants me and she sees you as an obstacle." Harrison's voice was hard with anger. "I need to prove it, Adelaide. I need evidence before I can go to the sheriff." Adelaide squeezed his hand weakly. "Be careful. If she is capable of this, she is capable of anything." Harrison knew Adelaide was right. He needed to be smart about this, needed to catch Vivian in a way that left no doubt of her guilt. He began by searching Vivian's room at the hotel where she was staying. It was a risky move, but he had to know for certain. He waited until she left for the day, then used his friendship with the hotel owner to gain access. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Hidden in her trunk, wrapped in cloth, were several small bottles containing powders and dried plants. Harrison did not recognize all of them, but he took samples, carefully rewrapping everything to hide evidence of his search. He brought the samples to Dr. Fletcher, who examined them with grim expertise. "This one is arsenic," the doctor said, pointing to a white powder. "And this appears to be hemlock. Either one could cause the symptoms Miss Zimmerman experienced. Combined with other substances to mask the taste, administered gradually over time, they would create exactly the kind of illness we saw." "Is this enough to go to the sheriff, doctor?" Fletcher nodded slowly. "With Miss Zimmerman's testimony about who had access to her food and the evidence that Miss Carlyle possessed these poisons, yes. I believe Sheriff Morgan will take this seriously." But Harrison wanted more. He wanted Vivian to confess, wanted her to face what she had done. An idea began to form in his mind, dangerous but potentially effective. He sent word to Vivian that Adelaide had died in the night, that her body had finally given out from the prolonged illness. The message expressed his grief and his need for comfort. He asked Vivian to meet him at his hotel room that evening. Vivian received the news with carefully constructed sorrow, but inside she was triumphant. Adelaide Zimmerman was dead, removed from her path. Now Harrison would turn to her for comfort, would see that Vivian had been there all along, waiting for him. She dressed carefully that evening, choosing a dark dress appropriate for mourning but cut to show off her figure. She knocked on Harrison's hotel room door, composing her face into lines of sympathy. Harrison opened the door, his expression appropriately somber. "Thank you for coming, Vivian. I did not want to be alone tonight." "Of course, Harrison. I am so sorry for your loss." She entered the room, laying a hand on his arm. That poor girl, to die so young, so suddenly. Not so suddenly, Harrison said quietly, closing the door behind her. She was ill for weeks. Yes, but no one expected her to die. Dr. Fletcher seemed to think she was improving. Vivian moved closer to him, her voice dropping to a soft purr. You must be devastated. I am. But you know what troubles me most, Vivian? I cannot understand why she got so sick in the first place. Healthy young woman, no history of illness, suddenly wasting away. He watched her carefully, noting the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. These things happen, Vivian said carefully. Sometimes people just take ill, do they? Or sometimes people help them along. Harrison's voice hardened. Tell me, Vivian, what did you put in Adelaide's food? Vivian's face went blank with shock, then twisted with anger. I do not know what you are talking about. How dare you accuse me? I found the poisons in your room. The arsenic, the hemlock. Dr. Fletcher confirmed what they were. Harrison stepped closer, his eyes blazing. You poisoned Adelaide because you wanted her out of the way. You were willing to murder an innocent woman because you could not accept that I did not want you. Vivian's composure cracked. She was nobody, a seamstress from back east with a scandal in her past. I am the daughter of one of the most successful ranchers in Colorado. We should have been together, Harrison. It made sense, it was right. But you could not see that, could not see me because you were too busy mooning over that pathetic girl. So you decided to kill her. Harrison's voice was deadly quiet. I decided to remove an obstacle. Vivian's eyes blazed with manic intensity. She was dying anyway, Harrison. I just helped it along. And now she is gone and we can be together like we were always meant to be. Adelaide is not dead, Vivian. The color drained from Vivian's face. What? I lied to get you here, to get you to confess. And Sheriff Morgan has been standing outside that door the whole time, listening to every word you said. The door opened and Sheriff Morgan entered, his weathered face hard with disgust. Behind him stood Dr. Fletcher, who had been witness to the conversation as well. Miss Carlyle, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Adelaide Zimmerman, the sheriff said, producing a pair of iron shackles. Vivian lunged at Harrison, her face contorted with rage. You bastard! She has bewitched you. You are mine, Harrison Rhodes. Mine. Sheriff Morgan and his deputy grabbed Vivian, restraining her as she screamed and fought. Her carefully constructed facade had shattered completely, revealing the madness beneath. As they dragged her away, still screaming threats and obscenities, Harrison slumped against the wall, shaking with reaction. It was over. Adelaide was safe. He returned to the boarding house to find Adelaide awake and sitting up in bed, still weak but visibly better. Mrs. Howell had told her what Harrison was doing, and she had been waiting anxiously for his return. Did it work? She asked as soon as he entered. Harrison sat on the edge of her bed, taking her hand. She confessed. Sheriff Morgan arrested her. You are safe now, Adelaide. Tears spilled down Adelaide's cheeks, and Harrison gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of her fragile state. She clung to him, weeping with relief and exhaustion and the release of weeks of suffering. I was so frightened, she whispered against his chest. I thought I was dying, thought I would never see you again. You are alive. You are going to recover, and I am never going to let anyone hurt you again. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. I love you, Adelaide Zimmerman. I think I have loved you from the first moment I saw you. She pulled back to look at him, her green eyes shining with emotion. I love you too, Harrison. So much. He kissed her then, gently, reverently, pouring all his love and relief into that tender touch. Adelaide melted into him, her hand coming up to cup his cheek, feeling the roughness of his stubble, the warmth of his skin. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Adelaide was smiling despite the tears still wet on her cheeks. "Marry me," Harrison said suddenly. "As soon as you are well enough, marry me. I do not want to wait, do not want to spend another day without knowing you are mine." "Yes," Adelaide breathed. "Yes, Harrison, I will marry you." Adelaide's recovery took several more weeks. Harrison stayed in Montrose throughout, refusing to leave her side despite the work piling up at his ranch. He sent messages to his foreman, trusted the man to keep things running, but his place was with Adelaide. He brought her flowers every day, read to her when she was too weak to hold a book herself, told her stories about his ranch and the life they would build together. As she grew stronger, he helped her walk around the boarding house, supporting her when her legs trembled with fatigue, encouraging her to take just a few more steps. Mrs. Howell and the other boarders watched the courtship with warm approval. Harrison's devotion to Adelaide had won over even the most skeptical hearts. Here was a man who had nursed his beloved through the worst illness, who had caught her poisoner and brought her to justice, who clearly cherished Adelaide more than life itself. Vivian Carlyle's trial was swift. With her confession overheard by the sheriff and doctor, with the physical evidence of the poisons found in her possession, there was no question of her guilt. She was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison, her beauty and family connections unable to save her from the consequences of her actions. Her father tried to visit Harrison once, attempting to apologize for his daughter's actions and salvage some relationship between their families. Harrison refused to see him. He wanted nothing to do with the Carlyles, wanted to wipe that entire chapter of his life from memory. By late July, Adelaide was well enough to leave the boarding house for longer periods. Harrison began taking her on rides in a rented buggy, showing her the country around Montrose, preparing her for the move to his ranch. One afternoon, they drove up into the mountains, following a narrow trail to a high meadow filled with wildflowers. The view was breathtaking. The valley spread out below them like a patchwork quilt in shades of green and gold. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still dusted with snow despite the summer heat. Harrison spread a blanket under a pine tree and they sat together, Adelaide leaning against his chest as his arms wrapped around her waist. The peace of the moment was profound after the terror and uncertainty of the past months. "Tell me about the ranch," Adelaide said softly. "I want to know everything." Harrison smiled, his chin resting on top of her head. "It is in a valley about 15 miles from here, sheltered by mountains on 3 sides. The land is good, with plenty of water and grass for the cattle. The house is not fancy, just a simple ranch house, but it is solid and comfortable. I built most of it myself after my parents died. It sounds wonderful. I want to expand it, add rooms for the children we will have. There is a spot near the house where your garden could be, gets good sun most of the day. And I thought maybe we could build a small workroom where you could continue your sewing if you wanted. I know you take pride in your work." Adelaide turned in his arms to look at him, her eyes soft with love. "You have been thinking about this." "I have been thinking about it since the day I met you, about building a life with you, growing old together." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You have become everything to me, Adelaide, my whole world." She kissed him, no longer gentle and chaste as their previous kisses had been, but with passion and hunger and promise. Harrison responded in kind, pulling her closer, one hand tangling in her auburn hair. They were alone in this high meadow, with only the sky and mountains as witnesses, and the desire that had been building between them for months threatened to overwhelm them both. But Harrison pulled back, breathing hard, his eyes dark with wanting. "We should wait. You are still recovering and I want to do this right. I want you to be my wife first." Adelaide nodded, though her body ached with unfulfilled need. Soon, very soon. I have already spoken to the preacher. We can marry as soon as you feel ready. They set the date for 2 weeks later in mid-August. It would be a simple ceremony at the church in Montrose, with Mrs. Howell, Dr. Fletcher, and a few other friends in attendance. Adelaide spent the intervening time finishing her own wedding dress, a beautiful creation of cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hands, once so weak and trembling, were steady again as she worked the intricate stitches. Harrison arranged everything else. He hired a wagon to transport Adelaide's belongings to the ranch, made sure the house was clean and ready for her arrival, even ordered a new bed from Denver as a wedding gift. He wanted everything to be perfect for his bride. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the August sky a brilliant blue overhead. Adelaide dressed with Mrs. Howell's help, her hair pinned up in an elegant style with small white flowers tucked into the auburn curls. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the radiant woman staring back at her. 6 months ago, she had been alone and adrift, running from scandal and shame. Now she was about to marry a man she loved with her whole heart, about to start a new life in this beautiful wild country. The journey had been harrowing, nearly fatal, but it had led her here to this moment, and she would not change a thing. Harrison waited at the altar in his best suit, his hair freshly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. When Adelaide entered the church on Dr. Fletcher's arm, Harrison's breath caught in his throat. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and the knowledge that she was about to become his wife filled him with a joy so intense it was almost painful. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged vows in steady voices, Harrison sliding a simple gold band onto Adelaide's finger, Adelaide doing the same for him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Harrison he could kiss his bride, Harrison pulled Adelaide into his arms and kissed her with all the love and passion he had been holding back for months. The small congregation cheered, and Mrs. Howell wept happy tears into her handkerchief. Afterward, there was a simple celebration at the hotel restaurant, with cake and champagne and toasts to the happy couple. But Harrison and Adelaide were impatient to leave, to begin their life together. As soon as it was polite to do so, they made their excuses and climbed into Harrison's wagon for the journey to the ranch. The ride took a few hours, winding through the valley as the sun began to sink toward the western mountains. Harrison pointed out landmarks, telling Adelaide stories about the land and its history. Adelaide sat close beside him, her hand resting on his thigh, content just to be near him. When they finally arrived at the ranch, Adelaide gasped at her first sight of her new home. The house was indeed simple, a sturdy wooden structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney. But it was set in a spot of surpassing beauty, nestled in a valley with a creek running nearby and mountains rising all around. Cottonwood trees shaded the yard, and she could see the outbuildings and corrals where Harrison kept his cattle and horses. "Oh, Harrison, it is perfect," she breathed. He helped her down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. Adelaide laughed, her arms going around his neck as he carried her up the porch steps and over the threshold. The inside of the house was neat and masculine, with simple furniture and few decorations. But Adelaide could see the potential, could already imagine how she would make this place a real home. Harrison carried her straight through to the bedroom, where the new bed stood covered in a beautiful quilt. He set her gently on her feet, his hands going to the buttons of her dress. "I have waited so long for this," he murmured, his voice rough with desire. "Wanted you since the moment I first saw you." Adelaide's fingers found the buttons of his shirt, working them free with shaking hands. I have wanted you too, dreamed of this. They undressed each other slowly, savoring each new revelation of skin, mapping each other's bodies with gentle hands and hungry eyes. When they finally came together, skin against skin, it was with a sense of rightness that transcended mere physical pleasure. This was a joining of souls as much as bodies, a promise made flesh. Harrison was gentle with Adelaide, mindful of her recent illness, taking his time to ensure her pleasure even as his own need threatened to overwhelm him. She responded with a passion that matched his own, her body arching into his touch, her hands clutching at his shoulders as waves of sensation washed over her. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed, the summer evening air cooling their heated skin through the open window. Harrison held Adelaide close, one hand stroking her hair, marveling at the fact that she was finally his, that they had both survived the darkness and found their way to this moment of perfect peace. "I love you," Adelaide whispered, pressing a kiss to his chest. "So much, Harrison." "I love you too, my beautiful wife." He tilted her face up to his, kissing her deeply. "I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy." Adelaide smiled against his lips. "You already do." The weeks that followed their wedding were a time of adjustment and joy. Adelaide threw herself into making the ranch house a real home, adding curtains and decorations, planting a garden near the house as Harrison had suggested. She learned to cook for her husband and his ranch hands, to manage a household in this rough country where the nearest store was hours away. Harrison taught her to ride, putting her on a gentle mare and leading her around the property until she grew confident enough to venture out on her own. They would ride together in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their days and their dreams for the future. The ranch hands, initially skeptical of the Eastern lady their boss had married, were quickly won over by Adelaide's warmth and genuine interest in their lives. She patched their clothes, doctored their injuries, and always had a kind word and a smile for them. They became fiercely protective of her, remembering what she had survived, seeing how happy she made Harrison. As autumn painted the mountains in gold and crimson, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. The realization brought both joy and fear. She had nearly died just months before, and the thought of carrying a child now while her body was still recovering terrified her. Harrison sensed her fear and held her close, his hand resting protectively over her still flat belly. "You are strong, Adelaide. You survived poison, survived weeks of agony. You can do this. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose the baby or worse? Nothing is going to go wrong. I will take care of you, and Dr. Fletcher will be here when the time comes. You are going to be fine, and our baby is going to be healthy and strong." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Have faith, my love." Adelaide did her best to follow his advice. She took care of herself, resting when she needed to, eating well, avoiding heavy work. Harrison was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about her, making sure she did not overexert herself. Winter came early that year, blanketing the valley in snow by late November. The ranch hands moved the cattle to lower pastures, and life settled into the slower rhythm of the cold months. Harrison spent more time in the house with Adelaide, reading by the fire, working on projects, simply enjoying her company. Christmas was a quiet affair, just the two of them exchanging simple gifts. Harrison had carved a beautiful cradle from pine wood, his hands shaping it with love and care. Adelaide gave him a new shirt she had sewn, the stitches perfect and even embroidered with his initials. They sat together by the fire that night, Adelaide's head on Harrison's shoulder, his hand resting on her swelling belly. The baby kicked, and Harrison's face lit up with wonder. "Did you feel that?" Adelaide laughed. I did, strong little thing just like the mother. He kissed her temple. I am so grateful for you, Adelaide. For this life we are building together. A year ago, I could not have imagined being this happy. Neither could I. I thought my life was over when I left Philadelphia. I thought I would always be alone, always running from the past. But then I found you and everything changed. She turned to look at him, her green eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. You saved me, Harrison. In every possible way, you saved me. We saved each other, he corrected gently. I was just going through the motions before I met you, building a ranch but not a life. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to dream about the future instead of just surviving the present. They made love that night in front of the fire, slowly and tenderly, celebrating the life they had created together. The love that had grown from the ashes of trauma and fear into something beautiful and unbreakable. Adelaide went into labor on a warm day in late April, as the valley was coming alive with spring. Harrison rode like a madman to fetch Dr. Fletcher, then paced anxiously outside the bedroom while the doctor and Mrs. Howell, who had come to help, attended to his wife. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Harrison could hear Adelaide crying out with pain, and it took all his willpower not to burst into the room. He had never felt so helpless, so useless. All he could do was wait and pray that both Adelaide and the baby would survive. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Harrison's heart leaped into his throat, and a moment later Mrs. Howell emerged from the bedroom, beaming. You have a son, Mr. Rhodes. A big, healthy boy, and Adelaide did beautifully. She is tired but well. Harrison pushed past her into the room. Adelaide lay in the bed, looking exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up as he entered, and her smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Come meet your son, she said softly. Harrison approached on shaking legs, sinking onto the edge of the bed. Adelaide pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny face, red and wrinkled, with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that were already trying to focus on the world around him. He is perfect, Harrison breathed, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand. The infant's fingers closed around his, gripping with surprising strength, and Harrison felt tears sting his eyes. You did so well, my love. I am so proud of you. Adelaide leaned against him, exhausted but happy. We should name him after your father. Harrison's father had been named Henry Rhodes. Harrison considered it for a moment, then nodded. Henry Rhodes. Yes, I think that is perfect. Their son's arrival brought new dimension to their lives. The ranch hands were delighted, each one finding excuses to stop by the house to catch a glimpse of the baby. Harrison was a devoted father from the start, happy to walk the floor with Henry in the middle of the night, to change diapers and give baths, to simply hold his son and marvel at the miracle of him. Adelaide blossomed as a mother, her natural nurturing instincts coming to the fore. She sang to Henry, told him stories, nursed him with a contentment that radiated from her very being. Watching her with their son, Harrison fell in love with her all over again, seeing new depths to the woman he had married. As Henry grew from infant to baby to toddler, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only joy. Their second child, a daughter they named Hope, arrived on a snowy December morning, 2 years after Henry's birth. She had Adelaide's auburn hair and Harrison's blue-gray eyes, and from the moment she entered the world, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch prospered under Harrison's careful management, growing to become one of the most successful operations in western Colorado. Adelaide's skill with a needle became well known, and she took on special sewing projects when time allowed, enjoying the creative outlet. Henry grew into a strong, capable boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ways of ranching and horses. Hope was more reserved, happier with books and music, and Adelaide taught her to play the piano Harrison had ordered as a surprise for their 5th anniversary. When Henry was 7 and Hope 5, Adelaide gave birth to twins, boys they named James and John. The house that had once seemed plenty large now felt cramped, and Harrison spent that summer building an addition, expanding the ranch house to accommodate their growing family. Through all the years, through all the joys and challenges of raising children and running a ranch, Harrison and Adelaide never lost the deep connection that had formed between them during those dark days when she had been fighting for her life. They made time for each other, stealing moments alone when they could, holding hands in the evening as they watched the sunset, making love with a passion that never dimmed. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Adelaide back to the high meadow where he had once proposed building a life with her. The children were being watched by Mrs. Howell, who had retired from running the boarding house and now lived in a small cottage on the ranch property. They sat under the same pine tree, older now, their faces bearing the marks of sun and wind and laughter. Adelaide's hair was still as vibrant as ever, though Harrison's had begun to show threads of silver at the temples. But when they looked at each other, they saw not the passage of time but the depth of love that had grown between them. "You ever think about that day?" Harrison asked, his arm around her shoulders. "The day you were so sick when I thought I might lose you." Adelaide was quiet for a moment, leaning into his warmth. "Sometimes. It feels like a nightmare, something that happened to someone else, but I am grateful for it in a way because it showed me what you were willing to do for me, how much you loved me even then. I would do it again in a heartbeat, go through all of it again if it meant having you in my life." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "You are my everything, Adelaide Rhodes, my wife, the mother of my children, my best friend. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Adelaide turned in his arms, cupping his face in her hands. "And I love you, Harrison. Thank you for seeing me that day in the dress shop. Thank you for being brave enough to court me, strong enough to save me, devoted enough to build this beautiful life with me." They kissed as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Two souls bound together by love that had been tested by fire and poison and had emerged stronger than ever. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as is the way of life. Mrs. Howell passed away peacefully in her sleep when Henry was 10, and Adelaide mourned the loss of the kind woman who had taken her in when she was a stranger in a strange land. They buried her on a hill overlooking the valley with a simple stone marker that read, "Beloved friend, Dr." Fletcher eventually retired and moved to Denver to live with his daughter, and Adelaide corresponded with him regularly, updating him on the children's growth and the ranch's success. He always wrote back with affection, remembering the young woman he had helped save and the love story he had witnessed. News reached them occasionally from the outside world. Vivian Carlisle had been released from prison after serving 12 years of her sentence. She had left Colorado immediately, and no one knew where she had gone. Harrison felt nothing but pity for her now, all the anger and hatred long since faded. She had tried to destroy their happiness and had only succeeded in forging it stronger. When Henry turned 18, he asked to attend college back east, wanting to study agriculture and animal husbandry to bring new methods back to the ranch. It was hard for Adelaide to let her firstborn go, but she understood his need to grow and learn. He promised to return, and she believed him. Hope, at 16, had no interest in leaving Colorado. She was courting the son of a neighboring rancher, a kind young man named Thomas, and Adelaide could see in her daughter's eyes the same love she had felt for Harrison at that age. When Thomas asked for Hope's hand in marriage on her 18th birthday, Adelaide and Harrison gave their blessing gladly. The twins, now 11, were inseparable hellions who kept Adelaide on her toes. They were full of mischief and energy, always getting into trouble but never with malice. They reminded Harrison of himself at that age, wild and free and full of dreams. On a warm summer evening, with Hope's wedding just weeks away and Henry home from college for the celebration, the whole family gathered on the porch as the sun set over the mountains. Harrison sat in his favorite chair with Adelaide on his lap, something he still did despite their children's teasing. Henry and Hope sat on the porch railing, the twins sprawled on the floor playing with the ranch dogs. "Tell us the story," Hope said suddenly, smiling at her parents. "About how you met and fell in love." It was a story the children had heard many times, but they never tired of it. Adelaide and Harrison exchanged glances, and Harrison began to speak, his voice warm with memory. "I saw your mother walking down the street in Montrose, and I knew in that instant that my life would never be the same." Adelaide picked up the thread. "He came into the dress shop where I worked, pretending he needed a shirt, but really he just wanted to talk to me." "I was not very subtle," Harrison admitted with a laugh. "No, but you were charming and kind, and you made me feel safe in a way I had never felt before." Adelaide's hand found Harrison's, their fingers intertwining in a gesture as natural as breathing. "Then came the hard part," Harrison said, his voice growing more serious. He told them about Adelaide's illness, about his suspicions and the discovery of Vivian's treachery, about the days he had spent by Adelaide's bedside fearing he would lose her. The children listened raptly even though they knew every word. This story was their history, the foundation of their family. "But she survived," Henry said, looking at his mother with pride and love. "She was strong." "She was and is the strongest person I know," Harrison agreed, pulling Adelaide closer. "And when she recovered, I asked her to marry me because I could not imagine spending another day without her. And I said yes, because I loved him with all my heart," Adelaide finished. "And I still do, more than I can ever say." Hope sighed happily. "That is so romantic. I hope Thomas and I have a love like yours." "You will," Adelaide assured her daughter. "Just remember that love is not just romance and passion. It is choosing each other every single day, even when things are hard. It is being willing to fight for each other, to sacrifice for each other. Your father and I have had a beautiful life, but we have also had challenges. What has kept us together through everything is our commitment to each other and to this family." Harrison nodded his agreement. "Your mother is the wisest woman I know, and you would all do well to listen to her." As darkness fell and the stars emerged overhead, the family lingered on the porch, talking and laughing, bound together by love and shared history. Adelaide looked at her husband, her children, the home they had built together in this wild and beautiful place, and her heart swelled with gratitude. She thought about the frightened young woman who had fled Philadelphia all those years ago, certain her life was over. That woman could never have imagined this future, this happiness, this love. The journey had been harrowing, the price nearly her life, but every moment of pain had been worth it to arrive here in this moment, surrounded by everything that mattered. Harrison caught her looking at him and smiled, that same smile that had captured her heart in a dress shop 10 years before. He leaned in and kissed her softly, a promise and a reminder of all they had shared and all they would continue to share. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured against her lips. "How lucky I am. How grateful I am that you saw me that day, that you chose me, that you saved me. You saved me too, remember? We saved each other." He pulled back to look into her eyes, his own shining with emotion. "And I would do it all again, Adelaide. Every moment, every challenge, every fear, because it led me to you and you are worth everything." Adelaide kissed him again, pouring all her love into that touch, and around them their children smiled, secure in the knowledge that they came from love, that they were the product of a bond that nothing could break. The years continued their steady march. Hope married her Thomas in a beautiful ceremony on the ranch, and within a year presented Adelaide and Harrison with their first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl named Adelaide Grace. Harrison cried when he held her for the first time, overwhelmed by the continuation of the family legacy. Henry returned to the ranch after college, bringing with him new ideas and methods that helped the operation grow even more successful. He eventually met and married a schoolteacher from Montrose, a brilliant woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the ranch property and began their own family. The twins grew into fine young men, James becoming a veterinarian, and John taking over more of the day-to-day ranch operations alongside his father and brother. The ranch that Harrison had once worked alone now employed dozens of hands and spread across thousands of acres. As Harrison and Adelaide grew older, they spent more time together and less time working. They would sit on the porch in the evening, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, marveling at how full and rich their lives had become. Adelaide's hair turned silver, but her green eyes remained bright and sharp. Harrison's face became deeply weathered, his body bearing the marks of a lifetime of hard work, but his love for his wife never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Harrison stood and raised his glass in a toast. 30 years ago, I married the most beautiful, brave, strong woman I have ever known. She has given me 4 incredible children, helped me build this ranch into something beyond my wildest dreams, and filled every single day with love and laughter. Adelaide, you are my heart, my soul, my reason for everything. Here is to 30 more years together, my love." Adelaide stood, her eyes wet with happy tears, and kissed her husband to the cheers and applause of their family. "Here is to forever, Harrison, because one lifetime with you will never be enough." They lived many more years together, growing old side by side, watching their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. The ranch passed to Henry and John jointly, and it continued to prosper and grow, a testament to everything Harrison had built and the family he and Adelaide had created. Adelaide Rhodes passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, with Harrison holding her hand. She simply closed her eyes one night and did not open them again, slipping away as gently as snow falling on the mountains. Harrison was devastated by her loss, but he found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had built together. He lived another 3 years, long enough to see his first great-great-grandchild born, a boy with auburn hair and green eyes that reminded everyone of Adelaide. Harrison Rhodes died on a warm spring day, sitting in his favorite chair on the porch, looking out over the valley he had loved. His children found him there, peaceful and still, a slight smile on his weathered face. They liked to think he had seen Adelaide waiting for him, calling him home. They buried Harrison next to Adelaide on the hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone marker that read Harrison and Adelaide Rhodes, together forever. 1856, 1912, and 1860, 1938. Their love story became legend in the family, passed down through generations. The story of the cowboy and the seamstress, of poison and devotion, of a love that had conquered death itself, and built a legacy that would endure for generations to come. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows through the valley and the setting sun paints the mountains gold, those who know the story say they can still feel the presence of Harrison and Adelaide Rhodes, watching over the land they loved and the family they created, their love eternal and unbreakable, a testament to the power of devotion and the strength of the human heart. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the ranch today, carrying on the traditions and values that Harrison and Adelaide established so long ago. The house has been expanded and modernized, but the original structure still stands, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. In the main room, a portrait hangs above the fireplace, painted when Harrison and Adelaide were in their prime. Harrison stands tall and strong, his hand resting on Adelaide's shoulder as she sits in a chair, both of them looking directly at the viewer with expressions of contentment and love. Visitors to the ranch always remark on the painting, on the obvious devotion captured in their eyes, on the sense of completion that radiates from the image. The story of Adelaide's poisoning and Harrison's devotion is told and retold, a reminder that true love is not just about romance and passion, but about fighting for each other, protecting each other, choosing each other again and again no matter what challenges arise. The wildflowers still bloom in the high meadow where Harrison once proposed his vision of their future together. The creek still runs clear and cold past the ranch house. The mountains still stand eternal and beautiful, watching over the valley as they have for millennia. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Harrison and Adelaide Rhodes are together still, their love story continuing beyond the boundaries of mortal existence, proof that some bonds are stronger than death, that some loves truly are forever. The Rhodes family ranch remains one of the most successful in Colorado, a living monument to what two people can build when they love each other completely, when they refuse to let anything, even attempted murder, destroy what they have found together. It stands as proof that from the darkest moments can come the brightest futures, that poison can be defeated by love, that one act of courage and devotion can change not just two lives but generations to come. And so the story ends where all the best stories end, with love triumphant, with family thriving, with a legacy that will endure long after the names have faded from memory. Harrison and Adelaide Rhodes found each other in a time and place where life was hard and death could come quickly. They fought for their love, built something beautiful together, and left the world better than they found it. Theirs was a love story for the ages, set against the backdrop of the Wild West, a tale of courage and devotion that proved that the human heart, when given freely to another, is the strongest force in existence. And though they have been gone for many years now, their love lives on in the land they cherished, the family they created, and the story that continues to inspire all those who hear it. This is the story of Adelaide and Harrison Rhodes, and it is a story of love eternal, of devotion unbreakable, of two souls who found each other against all odds and built something that would last forever. It is a reminder that we all have the capacity for such love, if we are brave enough to reach for it, strong enough to fight for it, and wise enough to cherish it every single day. And in the end, that is what makes their story not just a tale of the past, but a blueprint for the future, a testament to the enduring power of love to heal, to transform, and to create legacies that echo through time itself.